and I'll come back to them. I just wanted to share with you a little bit about the history of silencing women, and certainly Me Too. Women have spoken out a lot in that, and there have been other. The Black Lives Matter movement was started by women. There's been a lot of impulse, to speak the truth of what it's like to live in this particular culture as a woman. So the patterns and practices, though, of silencing women's speech are very old. And they go back 3,000 years to one of the very first written pieces of literature, which is Homer's Odyssey. The cultural normalization of the silencing of women's voices in the public sphere continued throughout ancient Greece and through Roman culture, and then was normalized over the following millennia. So Mary Beard is a world-renowned scholar. I don't know if you know of her or not, but she's got a great Twitter page, and she's a professor of classics at the University of Cambridge. And she invites us to consider that there's a really long backstory to the silencing of women. And she says, quote, "The history plays into the fact that women, even when they are not silenced, like in our day, still have to pay a very high price for being heard. The founders of the Black Lives Matter movement, women participating in the Me Too movement, Christine Blasey Ford, right? In the nomination for the Supreme Court in her testimony, Bill Cosby's 60 accusers, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and an untold number of women politicians, culture leaders, celebrities, and ordinary women like you and I have been bullied, have been harassed, have received death threats, been subject to cyberbullying and online attacks from people, from men, and from women trying to silence other women's voices. Louise Aramatsu from the London School of Economics and Public Science at the UK Cambridge wrote in their law journal that the silencing of women through political, social, cultural, or legal exclusion, marginalization, or violence has been and remains a common feature of patriarchy that is deeply embedded in all societies, irrespective of political ideology, time, or location. As an ideology and system of ideas and relations, patriarchy is adept at creating and utilizing silence to normalize and maintain gendered inequalities that privilege particular forms of masculinity over others and over all forms of femininity through structures, practices, culture, and law. So the thing that really has alarmed me recently is that after 5,000 years of systemic patriarchal oppression of women and the denigration of the feminine and its archetypal attributes, when you couple all of that with the rising of authoritarian political movements worldwide now, not just in the US, but worldwide now, on top of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's really created a dangerous imbalance in world culture, and I think in our collective unconscious. Amnesty International, their Secretary General, basically says that in 2021 and 2022, events in the early part, at the end of 2021 and the early part of 2022, have conspired to crush the rights and the dignity of millions of American women and girls, and I'm thinking of Afghanistan. And the world crisis did not impact equally, let alone fairly, and the disproportionate impacts on women and girls' rights are well documented, yet still neglected when not ignored outright. And we have to stand up and stare down this global assault on women and girls' dignity, he says. So those are some of the things that historically play into the silencing of women, and that contemporarily are continuing this. And so I guess what I kind of just wanted to talk about today, just see how everybody else is feeling, is like, how much of your life experiences unspoken or like just below the surface? Like, have you experienced times and situations where you felt like, either in the family, in personal relationships, in business, or just culture that you're like, being silenced? It's like the idea of like the five men and the one woman in a boardroom, and the woman comes up with a great idea, and the chairman of the board says, "Oh, that's a great idea. Would any of the men like to bring it up?" So what do you guys think about all this? What's your experience been with any of this? One of the things that makes me so hopeful is that in doing the research for my dissertation and really seeing and understanding that we are the first generations in the history of humanity to live past menopause as a cohort, as a group of women, that there've always been, older women and wise women and old grandmas and those kinds of things, but that for entire generations of women to live past menopause into this new life stage is a miracle. It's amazing. And so I don't think we're supposed to shut up. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
I don't think we are, because we're at a tipping point where if we don't wake people up to the rise of authoritarianism, to climate change, to the dangers of racism and classism and the huge economic divide and issues of everything from healthcare to education, if we can't wake people up to realize we have to make a paradigm shift, we don't just have to make a few changes, we have to make a paradigm shift. And I really do think that the fundamental attributes of what's considered to be the archetypal feminine, which exists in men and women, just as the archetypal masculine exists in the woman and the man, that these feminine aspects of nurturance and communication and empathy and caring and those kinds of things, if we can't do that for each other and for the planet, then we're doomed. The planet's going to be fine. I mean, I think of it oftentimes that like we have COVID and the planet has humans, like we're giving the planet a fever. We're making the planet sick. We're like the planet's version of COVID. And so I think that that by 2030, there's going to be over 87 million US women over 45. And that's huge. We control 89% of all discretionary spending in the country. It's billions. Everything from houses to vacations to cars to groceries to movies to entertainment. We are in control of so much economic power, but I don't think women realize they have it. And in terms of cultural power in the voting booth, cultural power in working to come together and solve problems. I mean, if 87 million women voted together to change things, we could transform this nation in 2 election cycles. So I really feel very hopeful about it. So I'm not going to stop talking about it.